Hello everybody and welcome to That's Football. I'm Mark Goldbridge and Manchester United are in crisis. You wouldn't have expected it on a weekend in the international break that Manchester United would basically announce who will be their, well, not new owners to be honest with you, because the Glazers are going to stay, but Sir Jim Ratcliffe is going to take 25% and take over the sporting side of things, which means no Qatar. Now, why am I doing this on That's Football? Because you get the most, I think, sense from rival fans, whether it's a signing, whether it's, you know, what happened with Chelsea just over a year ago, what happened with Newcastle. You can get a lot of sense from rival football fans who look at a rival like Manchester United and go, am I concerned by that ownership model? Are Manchester United about to be successful? When Newcastle were acquired by Saudi Arabia, I sat there and said, that's a game changer. They'll be winning league titles in the next decade. They'll be challenging in the next 5 years. And they've already done it. They're in the Champions League. We saw what happened with them and PSG a few weeks ago. You think about where they were when they were purchased. That was but a dream, and they did it in 2 years. So you can look at things like that. I mean, we've seen what Chelsea have done, $1 billion. It's not worked out as well, but you think they will keep spending till they are successful. So what do you think about football when it comes to Manchester United? Look, there are Manchester United fans out there that wanted a full sale and are now saying full sale as long as it's 25% and the Glazers stay. So, you know, I think within the fan base, I found it quite frustrating as a Man United fan how people flip-flop so much. But what do rivals fans think? What do you think about Manchester United? Can you be successful in the modern game when Man City are loaded, Newcastle are loaded, Arsenal are being run well, Liverpool are being run well? That's 4 spots. United would be looking to position themselves amongst the Spurs and the Brightons and the Aston Villas at the moment, who are all better than Manchester United. And we've not mentioned Chelsea in there as well. So there's 8 clubs better than Manchester United at the moment, and that's why United are down in mid-table. Can they find their... Where can Sir Jim Ratcliffe position Manchester United over the next 3 years working with the Glazers? Because I'm not talking about 3 years' time when he might buy all of the club. And, you know, the stadium still needs rebuilding. They're still massively in debt. They've still got issues with financial fair play. They've still got people like Jadon Sancho, Harry Maguire on ridiculous wages that they can't sell. So what is it that Sir Jim Ratcliffe is going to do over the next 3 years with the Glazers still in charge, but apparently taking a step back? How can they do that? And how successful can they be? Because I think United in crisis is something that, as United fans in the main, are concerned about. They're like, well, 3 years is a long time in football, and United have written off the last 10. So we're writing off another 3 on some projects that really doesn't look like it can work. I certainly personally do not think that you can win league titles anymore by, you know, on fumes, really. You know, the way that Leicester won it, you know, a team comes along and just wins the title and nobody expects it. And I don't think you can do that anymore. I think football has changed. And also one to bear in mind, and we may end up doing a video about this at some point over the next coming weeks and months, do Qatar just leave the Premier League completely and go, we wanted Man United, that was it? Or do they want a Premier League club and they go back in for a West Ham or somebody else like that? So that'll be very interesting, because I'm telling you now, if Qatar or any other state billionaire wants to buy a Premier League club, then they put themselves straight away into the equation that Newcastle and Man City are. I personally think that it's very difficult for the Liverpools and the Manchester City... sorry, not Manchester City. Very difficult for the Liverpools and the Manchester Uniteds to compete in the modern day unless you've got a Sir Alex Ferguson or a Jurgen Klopp, because you're doing it with a hand tied behind your back. And that's why I think what Liverpool have done this season is so fantastic, because they don't have... I mean, you can buy players, but they couldn't compete with Bellingham. Like, they couldn't do that. They didn't want to spend all their money on Bellingham because they knew one player wasn't enough. So there are limitations to what Jurgen Klopp can do, and he openly talks about that. And yet he has won a Premier League title, and yet they are in the top 4. But you give Jurgen Klopp what Newcastle's got, and you'd see Liverpool dominate with Manchester City every year. So I throw Liverpool into this, even though their ownership model isn't what Man United have got. And it's interesting that FSG were going to sell, and then they weren't going to sell. And the Glazers were going to sell, and then they're not going to sell. I really do think these owners of these clubs feel that something is coming along the line in 3 years, whether it's a massive lucrative TV deal, where the 3 PM games are now on on show, and you can, you know, work your own deals out, which will make massive money for people like Liverpool and Man United with big fan bases. Is there another Super League in the working, which is going to make massive money for them as well? You just feel with these FSGs and the, you know, maybe even the Cronkies, to be fair, but certainly the Glazers, that they're hanging around because they suspect something's going to happen in football that's going to make them a lot more money than it would do selling them now. But what does that mean in the short term? Well, unless, like I say, unless you can create something like Jurgen Klopp has at Liverpool and fight with one arm behind your back, you know, competently, I don't see Manchester United being able to compete. I really don't. I'd be interested to see what you got to say in the comments, because how do you compete when you don't really have any money? How do you compete when the money needs to be spent on other areas? How do you compete when everybody else has got better things than you? I mean, there's talk of a new director of football. There's talk of, you know, a change around the sporting side of things. But it would take 2 years to try and emulate what Brighton do and start scouting cheap players. It will take 2 years to start recruiting like Man City do to build the squad that's required. And I look at that, just looking at the Man United playing staff, I think there's major issues in mentality there that players that will stay. It's not mission impossible, but I think it's really difficult to predict. As a Man United fan, it's really, really difficult to predict a future that's any better than the 10 years we've just had. Sporadically, there might be a Europa League or an FA Cup or a Carabao Cup, but I don't see a Premier League. I don't see United mixing it up consistently in that situation, because I just think it's years and years and years away. And of course, the contrast between Sir Jim Ratcliffe taking 25% and working with the Glazers for the next few years, and the Glazers selling to somebody like Qatar, is night and day to me, because I've seen it with Newcastle. They're a relegation club. 18 months later, they're in the Champions League. Manchester City were a nothing club, and within a couple of years, they're competing, you know, for titles. Man United, if they'd been acquired by Qatar, I think that very, very quickly things would have changed. Very, very quickly. I don't think Sir Jim Ratcliffe can do that. In fact, he's already talking, well, he's not talking, but people are already talking about 3 years until he gets control. So a lot can, and also the most important thing is that whenever there's a project, people assume that it's a bit like a Formula One car that's not quick enough, is it? Red Bull's the quickest, so over the next 3 years we're going to catch up with Red Bull, and then maybe in 3 years you will be as quick as that Red Bull that was 3 years ago. But Red Bull are going to keep improving year on year, and that's the thing as well. Man United, it feels like some United fans are like, well, in 3 years' time, Sir Jim will take over and then the work really starts. But what's Villa and Brighton and Spurs and City and Newcastle and Chelsea and Liverpool and Arsenal doing over the next 3 years? They're competing with each other. They're not going to wait for Man United. They're not going to say, oh, we'll pop down the pub for 3 years while you sort yourselves out. They'll keep evolving as well. So you potentially move further and further behind. I think United are in crisis. I think they've been in crisis for a long, long time. And I think that this is, well, it's your opportunity in the comments to say, in any way, do you think that this sort of a deal makes Man United a threat again? I mean, there will be improvements. I've not spoken about that. There will be improvements. There's some very, very quick improvements that can be made. Of course there are. The fact that the Glazers have had, you know, complete and utter wallies running the club for the last 10 years, if you just get better people in, there will be some improvement. But it's not going to be, you know, magic beans and, you know, grow a Premier League title. I think United... I don't think United finishing third or fourth every year is actually good enough, but they might be able to do that if they start to run the club a bit better. But I just don't think running your club... I suppose this is the headline. I don't think running your club well is enough to win titles anymore. It used to be, but I don't think it is now. I don't think just because you run your club, you get a better director of football, you get a better CEO, you know, you get better recruitment, you get better infrastructure. I don't think that wins you titles anymore. I think it makes you closer to top four consistently, but I don't think it wins you titles. I mean, Spurs were very, you know, consistent with Poch, weren't they, a few years ago? Liverpool have been very consistent with Klopp. Arsenal have been with Arteta. But I think if you want to win titles these days, just being a well-run... I mean, Brighton are a well-run club. They're not going to win the title. To win the title... How did Brighton win the title? They've got the best recruitment. They play some of the best football in Europe. How did Brighton not win the title then? You know, they're nowhere near winning a title, because to win a title, they probably need to be backed with about £300 million every transfer window for about 5 years, and to have that consistency of quality of talent. Are United going to have that? I don't think they are, so I don't think they'll compete. Get your comments in below. Smash a like on the video. Make sure you subscribe. I'll speak to you on the next one.